called an MVNO in wireless, where they would, hopefully, let's say, buy capacity from Sprint on our network, but they might be Comcast or Time Warner branded wireless devices, so their content could go to end users no matter where they are. And I think it's probably fairly similar to the strategy that these two guys have as well.
Danny, you've got a Fios offering, you have a wireless offering. Do you see a world where it's possible that there would be, you would finally, because of the power of Fios, because of the power of what you have with your infrastructure, where you can reclaim what I regard as being the device-driven world we're in? In other words, there was such hoopla about getting Apple, okay, about getting the iPhone. I almost feel like the intellectual drive of the web, the intellectual drive of cell business, of wireless, has shifted to the device makers, and all of you are subsidizing these guys. Do you envision a world where we can get back on even footing, and all the infrastructure that you put in will make it so that you can start telling the device companies what they should have to charge you?
Well, when I look at that question, I think we got to look at the full value proposition. So it has to be the foundation of the spectrum, the quality of the network over that spectrum, the operating systems, and the devices. It's that combination that interfaces with the customer and provides the great customer experience and mobility. So I think the greatest responsibility that we have as the industry becomes more complex is to simplify the integration of all those elements of the value proposition, and that's where we truly drive value for our shareholders and our customers. So I don't think it's any one element, just like the devices.
Dan Hesse, your company is widely perceived by Wall Street, by the research, to have to pay the most for subsidies. In a world where there may only be two very large players, New York Times says Coke and Pepsi today, would you be able to afford to get the iPhone?
We can afford a lot of things. That's no statement at all about whether we may or may not get the iPhone. But I don't think there's any question for all of us that subsidies are going to increase as a combination of devices getting both more powerful. So there actually is more stuff going into them, like 10 and 20 megapixel cameras, and now we have dual core processors. In 2012 we'll probably have quad core processors. It's going to be more cost to those. And we're going to try, of course, I think all of us, to pass more of that cost on to the end user. The good thing for us in terms of the business model of smartphones, even though the devices and subsidies are higher, ARPU tends to be higher, average revenue per user, and churn tends to be lower. So the overall called customer lifetime value of a smartphone user is actually higher than it is for a non-smartphone user. So you got to think of subsidy as just one element of the overall economic equation for us. So actually, in the last quarter, one of the reasons that they would say our subsidies are higher is 69% of the phones we sold in the fourth quarter were smartphones. We are very heavily, into data, so you have to look at the mix issue. It's not so much. I will say that there are some cost advantages to scale in terms of, if you're buying 1 million units versus 2 million units, you get a better deal if you're buying 2 million or 1 million. But we feel we can stay very competitive. And have. Actually, we're going to announce our 22nd 4G device at this show.
Ralph, a lot of people cheered and took up the stock of Apple yesterday because people perceive that you will have perhaps 34 million new customers. Have you really lost any customers to Verizon Wireless of any speakable amount since they started with the iPhone? And do you really look at that as an important way to be able to sell into devices because it's got that much buzz and that much power?
Jim, obviously we're not through the end of the first quarter, so we can't comment on those kinds of
facts.
It's
just a couple of us here.
Yeah.
It qualifies as off the record.
Can I do it in Spanish then? Look, I think that one of the things that we bring to the table when we bring these two great companies together is that they get the best device portfolio. And I think that T-Mobile customers, when this combination is done, will have access to the best device portfolio in the market, which we think is the portfolio that we have. So I think that's a benefit that we'll bring immediately to those T-Mobile customers.
Okay, I want to do a little bit of a lightning round. Last question. I pick up the New York Times, though, before I get to my lightning round. And I want everyone to be able to respond. You can take any time you want. The New York Times, not me, okay? The New York Times says on the front page, little to cheer for consumers in AT&T deal. Ralph.
False. There's a lot, I'll give you three quick ones.
Okay.
Number one, it resolves the pending spectrum challenges that we face in major cities. It allows the mobile broadband revolution to continue to grow. We have led it. It will continue. Number two, when you combine networks, it adds a denser grid, more capacity, again, a public benefit. And third, we've committed to roll out LTE to 95% of the U.S. population. That brings the best technology in the world to rural America, to urban America, and to keep America in the lead. I think those are three great propositions, not just for the industry, but I think for the country.
Dan Hesse?
But you and Tim already had 4G. We had to mix it up a little bit up here, you know? No, but I have to agree with the Times.
It's always the same competition. Anybody got back? Okay, Dan Mead, what do you think? Because you guys did not say yesterday this is blatantly anti-competitive and it should be stopped.
I think the underlying issue is a fundamentally sound spectrum policy to foster innovation in the industry. I think that we have a tremendous amount of competition in the industry. We're going to go through changes like the one that Ralph just described, but making sure that we're in an industry that continues to lead with innovation, create new value propositions, that's going to ensure the opportunity for consumers for great value, and is going to ensure a very healthy ecosystem for many of those in the audience that are providers into the ecosystem. So I'm not concerned about it.
You don't think that in 1984, when the government broke up Ma Bell, it was the idea that there should be as much competition as possible and we're slipping back to another world?
No, I think that we're in a very innovative environment, and I think it's going to continue to be that way. So I think that statement from the Times is an overstatement. I do not agree with it.
All right, got to play a lightning round in our remaining 5 minutes. And thank you for being cordial about all this, because, you know, it's difficult, because it would have been very easy just to be able to try to skirt the issue, but we can't, because this is a front page story in every single paper. All right, what I want to know, and again, this is for people that I go and check with the CNBC Mad Money callers, Twitter again. I want to know who's a friend and who is a foe, and who might turn out to be a frenemy or a foe in the future. Ralph, Facebook.
Friend.
Just a friend.
Great friend.
But what about if they decide to go in, somehow be able to hook up with a light square and go right against you?
Well, then there'd be a frenemy.
All right, fair enough. All right, here's one that I think that we all take for granted as being a terrific thing, but I know it, just forget about the pricing issue for a moment. Dan Hesse, Netflix is what I keep hearing when I'm with guys who do optical equipment, when I'm with guys who are trying to supply you with the right stuff. All they talk about is one little company that is rocking this world and making you get a lot of equipment. Does that make Netflix a friend or a foe?
Well, I'd say it really depends over time what the business model will be. I can't really say one way or the other at this point in time. I still think they're a friend. I think anything that has users want to basically have content come down to their mobile devices is a friend. I think what'll be important over time is the business model that makes sense for both us and content providers. And I think that's one of the issues that still needs to be resolved, both in the industry and how we do it in the market. Traditionally, the end user has always paid for everything.
Right.
So the question is, do we keep just raising rates to end users, or do content providers begin to share it?
Would you want to own Twitter?
I don't think we want to comment on who we want to own at this point. We have enough in our background.
Dan Hesse, I think you've got that. Microsoft.
Friend. And actually, I think what'll be helpful to us in our industry is if this Microsoft-Nokia partnership arrangement is successful. I think it'll give end users more choice. Microsoft is obviously a very innovative company. Deep pockets, brings a lot from their desktop experience, particularly for enterprise. So I see the partnership as positive. And today, if you will, you have two dominant OSs, if you will, in terms of the growth. It's Apple and Android. RIM is still just about that size, but more niche in business. And if you will, the other two are beginning to move into their territories, so they're beginning to lose some share. I think it's good for our industry to have, if you will, a strong fourth choice. So I consider Microsoft a friend.
Okay, Dan Mead, Google now and Google Chrome later.
Yeah, Google is a friend. Google's an important business partner. When we entered a relationship with them, and we created the Droid franchise based on the Android operating system. It was with a thought of a long-term relationship. They're a friend. We have a very cooperative partnership with them.
Okay. Just give me 45 seconds left. Ralph, let me ask you, when you look at the world and you look at all these different players, Facebook, Netflix, you know that Facebook could be worth $85 billion. You know that Twitter is going to be worth I'm hearing $50 billion for Groupon. I'm going to put our stock hats on for a second. Are we about to have another round of craziness that is going to make it so that these companies are going to have more cash and more power than they should?
You know, it's something that we have seen before as the internet bubble kind of burst a few years ago. It's hard to tell here, though. These companies are so good and so quick that it's a little bit too early to judge, in my view, Jim. But they certainly are bringing a lot of excitement, a lot of usage to the network, and it makes our users very happy to use the application. So I think it's terrific right now.
All right. Well, unfortunately, our time is up. But I want to thank you so much. This is a great panel. Ralph, Dan, and Dan, thank you for being forthcoming. And I know that it's not an easy thing, but I think you gave the right answers. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.